I've got to manage myself, I've got to manage my mind. The task is not easy, but to high heights I climb.
I'm determined to succeed, so no excuses, please. If you don't want success in life, then don't hinder me. Yes, let the whole world know you are a CEO. You are a CEO. I'm a CEO. You are a CEO. I'm a CEO. The time is here to celebrate. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. Yes, let the whole world know. The time is here to celebrate. Success is calling, so don't be late. You are a CEO.
Hello, everyone, and I would like to welcome you to another episode of COTV Live. My name is Terry Fulton, filling in for Michael E. Parker, and we have another wonderful show set up for you tonight. Last time we were with you, we talked about Let's Get Organized Part 2, and tonight we are talking about Part 3, and we're going to continue this series until we get organized. And so I'm really grateful for everybody who's tuning in. And without further ado, I would like to welcome to the set my good friend, Mom, AKA Samiya Hethcock. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing amazing.
You're doing amazing. Yeah, I'm sure you are. You're a mom. Moms are amazing. I'm a mama's boy, so I can say that.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm sure you were a part of, the audience when we were looking at last show and you saw some of the things that Charlene and I were talking about. And, there was a case study that we talked about.
Yes.
And the case study talked about Jeffrey and his dear wife, Cindy, who just happened to be, a professional working from home, who just happened to have 2 children, and whose husband happened to be leaving the house to go to work. Does that kind of sound for
Cindy sounds familiar.
Do you
I can relate to Cindy. Very familiar with Cindy's wife.
Yeah, so that case study focused more on Jeffrey's issues. Now since you kind of know what Cindy's going through, I was hoping tonight you can help people understand Cindy's life.
Yeah, I'd be happy to give people a window into Cindy's life. I can relate to Cindy quite well.
Awesome. So before getting too deep into, parenting and being an organized parent, you're also a spouse and making sure that your marriage has some organization and function to it. Also, a great professional and your husband also working and making sure that you have that part of your life lined up and organized. Let's kind of talk about the last show first. And we were really trying to take away people's false sense of managing time because you really don't.
Right.
Because time ticks and ticks and ticks with us or without us. You're really managing yourself. You're managing life's demands. You're managing what you value and being able to touch those values. What are some thoughts that just come to your mind from last show before getting into what we're going to talk about tonight?
Yeah, I love when we talk about that, and that is like a huge aha about time itself because it's such a buzzword, time management.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't make sense when you think about it. How can you manage something that keeps moving regardless?
Right.
So I think our approach to managing yourself is just so key. That's what you have control over, and hence being the CEO of yourself. So being able to do what you can to prioritize things in your life And we always talk about the big rocks and everything, getting those things in order where you can.
Yeah.
And your environment, your space, and everything is so critical
Yeah.
to having a flow
Yeah.
in your life.
Awesome, awesome. And even going back a show before that, we had Mr. Parker and I had a just fireside chat, just talking about just the mindset of being organized and how to even approach it, right? So I want to kind of talk about organization from a different angle. I want
All
to
right,
kind
let's
of
go.
flip it a little bit.
Okay.
So I know we talked about managing self and being the CEO of your own life, but we don't live in a bubble.
Right.
We have relationships.
Right.
There are people that are involved in our lives.
Right.
How in the world does a mom organize her life around a household, or not just a mom, I'm saying that because you're a mom, but
Right.
a parent, single parent, two-parent household? How do you approach going about doing things in your home from an organization, especially during like this pandemic? Both of your kids are doing distance learning. You're the one that's at home. You know, Matt's out on the road building stuff for people.
Right.
What are some of your approaches and strategies and life hacks to be able to organize around parenting in the household?
I think when we first were hit with distance learning last year, almost a year ago now, it's amazing to see that Matt and I did have a conversation about, we talked about, the things that you can't change. So there is parts in your day that's just kind of set. So it's a time the kids go to school, time that he goes to work, time that my day starts, even though I'm working from home. And we had to kind of look at that and then lay it all out on a piece of paper, lay it all out in the level flow. And then all the areas of our life that surrounded that, we had to kind of see where does that go. The kids aren't going out, they're not going to their functions to recreate. How do we kind of fit all that in? Where does exercise come in? Where does, our family time, what does that even look like? We're not going out and doing things, so what does that look like? So we have this picture, actually I took a picture of it. We had this huge teacher-sized paper where we wrote everything out with the kids. And we got them involved. We were like, so what do you want your day to look like?
Wow.
So, and it doesn't look like that then, but we had to start somewhere. So we put all the big rocks in, and we were like, so when do you want your free time? And when do you want to have your reading time? And when do you want to do this? And they kind of all weighed in. And we just went for it and made adjustments along the way. Down to household, we gave them what their chores looked like in their bedroom and what mine looked like, and we just went for it. And we're to this day, we're still adjusting and figuring things out, but that is how that started during the pandemic.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it really started with you and Matt. You almost had a Jeffrey and Cindy moment.
Right.
Like you all sat down and communicated. You began to talk about it.
Yeah.
Then you brought the kids in. You identified all the demands in everybody's lives. And then you began to organize it on paper so it became visual. That's what you just described.
Yeah. And we're always, if you look in the boys' room and in their bathroom, we're always, because everyone is different. We're raising human beings, and they all have their approach and their likes, their dislikes, their quirks, and their strengths and their challenges. And so whereas some things might work for me, it might not work for them. And so we're trying to always kind of figure out what fits. But yeah, that's exactly where we started.
So you organize, see if the system's working, and then you reorganize.
We reorganize.
Based on maybe what's working and what's not working.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you really do have to have a mindset,
A mindset.
to stay in the battle.
And you can't quite back away from that. You gotta always have to be looking. And so Matt and I, we kind of do, we pull each other's coattails. Sometimes he'll say, he don't call me mom or somebody, say babe. Babe, we gotta look, the kids are, we gotta kind of tighten up here, or I noticed that they're really doing good here. We might wanna reinforce that. He's really good at that. And then I'll do what I can when he's not around to kind of test things out. And we just talk about it.
Nice.
Always talking about it. And it's not anything scheduled, we're always kind of doing a post check to see how they're doing.
That's great. So having something on paper and
It's
having
very key.
visuals is very critical to organizing a household.
It
right?
is.
So does, in terms of from the parenting standpoint with the organization, does coaching and training and teaching come into that? Like, okay, I know, boy number 1 and boy number 2, here's your chores, here's your tasks, but let me make sure that you know how to do it right.
Yeah,
and
no.
that you actually do it right.
That's ever
what's
evolving.
what's that like?
Yeah, that's ever evolving. I mean, we've tried checklists. We've tried actually walking through, let's just say, cleaning up your room. We've taken pictures, put it on the board. I mean, you just have to, I mean, they are growing and they're young. I mean, my children are 9 and my oldest just turned 13 and I have a surrogate that's 14. And so, so they're growing and developing into their own. And so what might have worked when they were younger, I have to kind of adjust. And sometimes you just got to get on.
So what you just described is like plum fools.
Yes.
They in that life where their body going through, so
There's a lot of change happening.
Plum fools.
Plum fools. And sometimes, you have to stand there, and sometimes you got to discipline, take things away,
Sure.
And then there's times where they just surprise you. Like even today, I was unloading the dishwasher and just doing my normal thing. And my son knew I was getting ready. And he was like, why don't I step in there and do that? I can do that for you. You can go get ready. And it just completely surprised me.
You almost cried?
Yeah, like, that is so nice of you. So, I mean, it's it's real, but, it's something that you can't give up on. It is a lot of repetition just in terms of the household and children. But it's very rewarding, when you see it kind of sinking in.
What physical organization did you do in the household to help with that? I know you talked about a schedule on paper, something that's visual and checklist, but like they're going to school at home.
Yeah.
So did you create a school environment at home? Do they know the difference between when they're at school versus when they're not at school? What does that look like?
Yeah, and we did, and not really at the beginning knowing what that looked like. They have actually transitioned schools, so they're still online, but they were doing one school, and then the beginning of this school year, they transitioned. So at the beginning of the school year, they always had desks in their room. They shared room for a while, and so there was a shared desk space, and then we also had a kitchen table downstairs. So for a while, at the end of last school year, it was more like that. And then they have a dedicated bin or a drawer for each of their learning materials. And it doesn't have to be over the top or in a very expensive range. For me, I did buy a drawer system that I keep their subjects separated. If nothing else, just making sure that math is with math, art is with art, but also even down to just a bin that you can just store in the closet, which is good enough because, you have 2 people in one room. They were eventually able to get their own room, so that helped with separating things, but we think about safety, separating and arrange. That is so important. Keeping things together where they go and making it clear that that's where it is, even if it's not super like labeled and everything, just keeping it separate so they know where to go to get their materials. And when school starts, they have a desk, they have a chair, but it's flexible. So sometimes they might want to come down on the couch and they might want to sit where I'm sitting, or they might want to sit in a window. That's fine too. But when they want to kind of sit propped up and learn, that is separate, absolutely.
And I like what you said, what they've always had versus this COVID environment, because what you kind of just described are principles. So even if they were still going to school traditionally and everything, when they come home, there might be homework and projects. They still need that dedicated, organized space. And even your mind begins to associate school with that space because that's what it was set up for, right? So very, very good, very good. So you mentioned some other things in there while you were kind of talking about the kids, was talking about working from home.
Oh, yeah.
So now let's talk about kind of the physical space. What have you done before even talking to employers and all that kind of stuff and all that? We'll talk about that in a second. I'm just still in the physical environment. What have you done to be able to associate work with a physical location and not losing that connection to when you're at work versus at home?
Now that is something I am still working on. So let's just, full disclosure, I'm still working on that. But I recognize the environment is so important just for your overall well-being, and being in the home as much as I've been, and been fortunate enough to actually be, is actually, you know, a wonderful, you know, blessing, if you will, to be able to be at home with your children, even with all the challenges. It's a very wonderful opportunity, but you have to create an environment where you can live. So when there's things everywhere, you don't know what's dedicated for work and what's dedicated for school, workout, where you sit down and have family time. That is, and you don't need a whole big space to do that. So that's very important. Even if it's, when I first started setting up my space, I did not have quite, I had a desk, but it wasn't quite set for working from home. So what I would do in the beginning, have what you call just like a plastic table that I would sit on the couch with. So that would be put up when I was done at the end of the day, and I'll take that out when it was time, when I was working. And then eventually I was able to buy a desk, and I reorganized my, my living room and created a small corner near a window to try and create some positive vibes. Got some plants in the house, cleaned off my workspace, went digital, got everything online. Got rid of things that I no longer needed. Decluttered supplies that you're not using, because I'm using things digital, and really leaned out and got pictures, you know, a couple of pictures of the kids and the family, and created a corner because I don't have a room to do that, a corner in the house. And so in terms of organizing the space, that's what that looks like for me professionally, and that's where I go.
Very good, very good, yeah, very good. So there's always a corner you can find,
You can find a corner.
Yeah. So that's really good.
A nice warm window. You can find that.
Beautiful, beautiful. So that's really interesting. Again, we're talking about principles here because, you know, you might be in an apartment. You know what I mean? You might live by yourself. You might just have a roommate. So you got to take the principles and apply it to your situation, what we're talking about here tonight. So I think this is fantastic. But don't forget, we're talking about some of the scheduling and the visuals and space and everything like that. But we're still really talking about organizing relationships. And so let's get to the marriage now. So we talked about the parenting and how things are working in the home because you're working from home and the kids are there. How in this dynamic, or just in general even, because you've been married for some time now, how do you make sure that Matt is included in your life rhythm? You know, I'm sure you've seen me talk about life rhythm a lot, and one of the principal things that we say is you can't make a life rhythm blueprint and not think about the people that are in your life. You gotta include them. You're not in the bubble. And so, you know, it seems like you're doing really well with the kids and that relationship as a mom, as a spouse. How are things going? How do you organize things around that?
Yeah, Matt just told me, I think it was last week, he said, when's the last time we went on a date night? It just was like, yeah, it's like,
Sound like he want a date.
Yeah, but where are we going?
You should have came back and said, when's the last time you asked me?
Yeah, right, yeah. Now, he did bring flowers, so that was nice. That was nice.
It. Go on, Matt.
Yeah, we've been married for going on 16 years, and it doesn't, I mean, time has just flown by, and we've been through a lot in that time. So COVID is unique because, you know, we were already not really going out as much. So things that we would do, that we did things together that we enjoyed. We like watching movies together. We might stay up late and play games, or you know, scroll through social media, laugh on funny videos.
I can see so
that. And those are things that, or we might share, things that we learned today, news or whatever. Just what they call shoot the breeze. That's our thing. That's our pastime. But in terms of rhythm, how we, and I never really thought about it like this until now. But some of the things that we do daily. So Matt starts his day at 4:30 a.m. Early. So I'm trying to kind of move into his area and trying to get earlier. I'm pushing between 5 and 5:30, not always consistent, but I'm trying to get there. But he is consistently always
He
up.
can call my wife and she would answer.
Now your wife.
She would answer.
Yes, she's been up actually, probably before him. So she takes the cake. But so he gets up early. So normally we're still laying down, and so typically we check in at around 7 in the morning. So he checks in to see how the kids are doing. Sometimes he talks to them on the phone and say, you know, he's parenting them over the phone or even FaceTime. We have iPhones, so we'll FaceTime and he'll, you know, check how they're doing, you know, time to get up, boys, get a move on. So he still has influence in the home, even though he's not there. And then he and I, we talk for a while, let me know what his day is going like. And sometimes we'll check in throughout the day, text, emojis and things like that. So that's, I mean, and whether or not you're physically present, that still keeps a connection. I think that's what I'm trying to say is, you know, you're still able to connect. It's not like you're in this bubble. You know, he's over there and I'm over here. We're still connected throughout the day. When I know what time he normally gets home, so I'm trying to make sure that, you know, I'm not necessarily running errands when he comes home. I'm not doing much outside the home these days, but try to know what his rhythm is and have a little time to kind of chat and catch up. And he might have other things to do even beyond that, and I may too, but that's our rhythm. And then we try and make sure the kids have a bedtime, and then we stay up a little bit past that so we can have some connection.
I see.
And then every Friday and Saturday are kind of like free days for the family and I. So family, him and I, and we kind of leverage those times when we can.
You really are Jeffrey and Cindy.
Jeffrey and Cindy.
You really
I feel
are
like
Jeffrey.
I feel like there was a motive
You really
there.
are Jeffrey and Cindy.
But
I'm
yes,
gonna
I
start
can
calling you
relate
Cindy.
to them. Cindy, I'm Cindy. Yes.
So what you just described to me, you know, I talked about those 4 things it takes to manage your life, and I talked about focus, I talked about self-discipline, I talked about organization. So you mentioned some of those things, but the critical one that you just described to me is the positive energy, the effort part.
Yeah.
Right? So that's part of the you versus you. Effort versus hard. Oh, it's hard being a parent. It's hard doing this distance learning. It's hard managing all this. Hard. Well, that negative energy, right? It kind of brings you down. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not looking at hard and easy like that. But when you start talking about something that's difficult, it kind of brings you down a little bit versus it's effort.
Yeah.
But because I love what I do, because I love my life, it's positive energy. So I don't mind staying up a little bit later when I know we're tired because our day started at 4:30, 5:30, but the kids are asleep. But because I love my husband, we're gonna put another hour in and connect, or that phone call, or different things like that.
Yeah.
How do you feel when you put the effort? Because I know there's times where we don't put that effort in, but what does it feel like when you make that effort and you could tell it was worth it?
You feel, to your point about flow, you do feel like a rhythm. Like there's, like everything is kind of lockstep and in place, and it's in full transparency. You know, there's times where, you know, I'm guilty of having that mindset too. But I really love uplift, because you can't come to uplift like that. You cannot come into uplift. You can't come to uplift like that. You have to describe it positive, so you are forced to look at things in your life that way. So I'm saying that to say is, it does help you to reevaluate the way you're looking at your life. So yeah, you can say it's hard, but that just totally takes a different spin and energy to it. So it's all about you. You change your mindset, and it changes everything around you. So your kids are pulling from you, your husband's pulling from you, they're drawing from your energy. And then as an individual, if I could just put this in terms of relationships too, you do need to have some time for self-care and to rejuvenate, so that relationship with you, and the things that you like to do, so that you can be rejuvenated to serve all of the areas in your life, whether you're a mom or a dad.
That's great.
So
that's great. Because a lot of times when we're talking about managing life, I won't say managing time, is we look at tasks projects, goals, but we don't look at people.
Yeah, that's so
It's
important.
so critical.
I love that spin.
Right, in terms of organizing your life around the people that are involved in it. That is just something that we miss a lot of the time.
And people is what help make your life, though, too, right?
Absolutely.
So your life is not tasks, like you said, checklists and everything. It's everything that brings you happiness and joy and feeds it.
Yeah,
right?
and even like the people part that you're bringing up, that tangible piece of spending time with my kids isn't a checklist. Those are people that I love.
Yes.
I created and I love them. Or my husband isn't a checklist. I love him. You know, my wife isn't a checklist. I love her. You know, these are things, my friends aren't a checklist. I care about them.
Right.
So when you look at it like that, the effort begins to minimize because you love what you do.
Yes, and
It's
it's a wonderful way to kind of center yourself and refocus, you know, on the whole point of it all.
Yeah.
You know, we all want to enjoy life, even in the pandemic. You know, we've had some wonderful times in the pandemic. I mean, they've had Nerf battles in the house. We've had movie nights in the house. We've had quiet moments of just family time. You know. I know me myself. I'm working out even more, and I'm enjoying that. So you know, we've had some you know, nice self-discoveries in the pandemic. So you have to. I mean, it's cliche, but it's so true. Focus on the positive, really, and minimize the negative. It's totally true.
So we're coming out of time, but we got to hit this last area. I think it's important is the professional side, because that's a relationship too.
Yeah.
Those are people too. And depending on who you work for, sometimes they're at war with these other people we've been talking about because they want their time.
Absolutely.
And they're not really worried about this time. And so fortunately, I know who you work with, so that ain't gonna happen. But you know,
it's so nice
it's family business. But how do people address that, you know, in terms of, you know, there's this whole thing about work-life balance, but you just have life, and work's a part of it, and so is everything else. So how do people mentally keep their life organized to where they can meet the demands from a professional standpoint, whether that's demands from the job or demands that we put on ourselves because we have professional goals and things like that too, and then not forget about everything else? How does all that come together?
I think we talked about this. There was a show about it. I forget the name of it that we did about success. I forget the name of it, but you and Michael actually talked about kind of how do you set yourself up for success during this time period. And one of the things you mentioned was communication. So communication is
huge.
That's it. So throughout all of it. So I did have a conversation with my boss, and so sweet, but about what my life looked like. And we had a discussion about it and began to kind of talk about the peaks of times. And there is a peak, there is a window. And if you kind of look at your life, you begin to kind of lay things out and look at the big rock, so to speak, there is a peak where everything kind of all comes together. And I think that is a fair conversation with your employer, if you are fortunate enough to work from home, is to talk about those peak times. And maybe those are times you may not have meetings, and those are times maybe you're doing more reporting type of work, research type of work. And then the meetings are probably before or after those peak times for a window, and you negotiate that. And then those are times where you can multitask with your kids. That's what I currently do as much as possible. And then when it's not possible, then I have a conversation with the kids, and we try and balance those two out. And then you have to plug in time to study and to deposit back into yourself professionally as well in your level flow, time where you're kind of, you know, sharpening the saw, if you will. That kind of needs to be added in, but communication was the biggest thing.
Communication is really the biggest thing. And not being afraid to have that conversation, you know what I mean? And sometimes you think it's gonna be, they're not gonna understand, and you might be surprised. Even some of the craziest employers might surprise you.
And then how many videos have we seen, recently on social media of people on the Zoom calls with holding the baby and the kids walking in? It is just the way it is right now.
Yeah.
And you would take a huge burden off yourself if you would just come forward and ask and just find out what's possible. Right. There's even programs and things put in place for working parents and different people that are in that situation. So it's a lot more common than what you think. You're not alone.
Right. And I would just add this little piece in there. You didn't reference it, but I know you believe in it. To be able to be successful, the most successful in those negotiations, if you're an organized employee.
Yeah, you got to have a good
You got to have a good
record.
rapport, right?
You got to have a good
That
track.
helps things tilt in your favor if you're organized in your approach at work, too.
And if you're taking these principles everywhere in your life, and CEO of your life,
absolutely,
that should be able to show up in everything.
Perfectly
right?
said. Well said. Well said. So this has been a wonderful conversation. I wish we could go on, but just remember, everyone, that we're talking about principles, right? So this is Samiya's story.
I'll be Cindy with it.
This is Samiya's story, right? But we all have a story, and that's why we have to be the CEO of our own lives. You might be single. You might have kids. You may not have kids. You might be a single parent, two-parent household. You might have other families living with you. That's my situation. You might be taking care of your parents or what have you. All these different dynamics are happening, but you can apply the principles no matter where you're at in your life. Just make sure that you're focused, you have positive energy, self-discipline, and you're organized in your approach, and you will be able to manage your life. So thank you, Samiya, again for tonight's show. We look forward to the next show. And speaking of the next show, we are going to go into the next area, which is Let's Get Organized Part 4. And this is going to be a magnificent show for you, where we're going to get into the environment a little bit. And that's all I'm going to give you. I can't give you nothing else. That's all I'm going to give you, a little sneak peek. So we're going to build on these shows as we go through this Let's Get Organized series. So between now and then, go out there and let the whole world know that you are a CEO. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Yes, let the whole world know. A CEO. You are a CEO.